Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Let's start today's conference. I would like to start with the following, that we are very grateful for this opportunity to invite everyone to speak about first 3 years since Latvia has adopted fiscal discipline law, and we are grateful to the European Commission, representation of European Commission in Latvia, for hosting it. And that's why I give the floor to Šteinbuka, head of European Commission representation in Latvia. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am very honored to greet you here in European Commission representation, you colleagues and our distinguished guests. The word fiscal is very close to my heart because if Fiscal Council is only 3 years old. I remember Jānis Platais was a budget minister of Latvia, and that was corresponding with the time when I started my work in the Ministry of Finance. And together with Jānis, we created the first Department of Fiscal Discipline in the ministry. So I think I was born with this word fiscal, but not everyone understands this word because when I became head of European Commission representation and I had to give interviews on all different themes, and I used this word fiscal. And then my former secretary called me and she said, Madam Šteinbuka, you are explaining everything very well, but there is one thing I don't understand. What is fiscal? What do you mean by fiscal? And I was very surprised at that moment, and I didn't know how to explain in simple words. Now I would respond to her that the word fiscal, especially if it is followed by the word discipline, fiscal discipline, it is on the subject that debt is no ally, or debt is no brother in Latvian. Amongst you colleagues, I think I don't have to explain what is fiscal and what is fiscal discipline. I would like to thank the Latvian Fiscal Discipline Council during those 3 years. 3 years, it's not a lot, but Latvia's independence is only 25 years long, and 3 out of 25 is okay. And now I have the floor for about 15 minutes, a bit less than that. I would like to present what I presented in our parliament in Saima already 2 days ago. And excuse me, those colleagues who attended this presentation in Saima. Unfortunately, during these 2 days, I have not changed my presentation. No new recommendations have been added, the same recommendations that I've already presented to our parliamentarians. I have not changed also the title. It is on recommendations. In this slide, I tried to show what are the tendencies, or what is the tendency of budget deficit in the European Union, in the Eurozone, and what are the tendencies for the future. The good news is the following: the budget deficit is going down, but that is an average temperature, average indicator. So budget deficit is slowly going down, with some exceptions. If we speak about countries, then you can see a map, and dark blue here, dark blue or darker countries, those countries working with budget surplus: Estonia, Germany, and Luxembourg. Taking into account that this picture is not very visible, you will get a presentation on paper or electronically, but there is, I can say that there are some, there are countries observing Maastricht criteria under budget deficit under 3%, and there are countries that are still some so-called, we can say, sinners, Greek, Spain, and Portugal. The next slide demonstrates the situation with state debt. Here the good news is the budget deficit going down. Unfortunately, it doesn't change anything in the picture about the government consolidated gross debt. Unfortunately, it is going up, and you can see in how many countries this amount exceeds the threshold, 60% out of GDP. Latvia is one of the good examples. We are not exceeding it, these 60%, and at the moment, and I want to stress this word, at the moment we are safe, we observe fiscal discipline, we are not under any threats, but speaking about the future, we have to ask ourselves a question, how sustainable is this situation? And maybe we have to take example from our neighbors, from Estonia, which is a total champion as to government consolidated debt, which is very little. Next good news that I wanted to share, connected with the previous slides, Latvia has a prevention mechanism, not a correction mechanism. And in this slide, you can see that if we compare with other countries, Latvia can be proud of its achievements in fiscal sector. Speaking about European Commission and its evaluation on the stability program of Latvia, I have to say that the budget corresponds to rules and regulations of fiscal discipline of European Union, but there are always some risks. Even in our situation, there is a risk of some possible corrections already in this year. Why? Because real GDP could grow not as fast as forecasted, and taking into account the slow inflation, this indicator could be lower, and GDP, which is a basis for tax, could not grow. It could not reach the forecasted average. Another thing that I wanted to inform you about, Latvia is allowed to use two reform clauses. One, withdraw budget deficit aims, and speaking about structural deficit, first clause, the reforms on pension systems, and you can see the figures here. And another clause, which is new, pension clause was already, pension reform was allowed already on previous years, but in healthcare we have been allowed to spend these sums that are shown on the screen, 35 million in 2017, 140 in 2018 million in 2018. Those are substantial amounts of money in order to tidy our welfare system. We have just to safeguard that those amounts are used to its maximum effect. We have been given a credit from the European Union to tidy this sector of welfare, although European Union has no recipe as to how and where it should be spent, and this is the responsibility of the government of Latvia, not to just spend this money, but spend to its maximum effect. So in 3-year time, Latvia would be already living in a welfare state. I would like to remind you about that. If speaking about recommendations, the status of budget has been evaluated, but it has not been evaluated according to a scale or a gradation. Why? Because Latvia, when adopting a law on fiscal discipline, is responsible to its people and to its legislators. This is an obligation that the government has to fulfill and observe. So European Commission is just observing the situation, and after the progress report, it is clear that speaking about the budget status quo, the promises that Latvia have made have been fulfilled. What European Commission is evaluating? 3 sectors: education and innovations. Those are one recommendation. Social matters, welfare, and here progress is scarce, as well as little progress has been made as to judicial system and judicial reforms. If we want to state an average, then I can say that the progress in the implementation of previous recommendations have been limited, taking into account that we have 3 out of 5. So that means limited achievements. Speaking about the new recommendations that have been published on the 18th of May, very recently, as you can see, some things have been repeated. European Commission repeats the same as last year's report. Maybe it's with different words, but the essence doesn't change. And there are recommendations on taxes, on tax issues, shadow economy, debt. Other recommendations concern budget, because they speak about budget expenditures, professional education or vocational education reform, welfare, then consolidation of scientific organization, and reforms in insolvency and unemployment. Returning to fiscal discipline, what are the main challenges for the budget of Latvia? I might say that those are 3. The income of tax, the structure of tax income, where if we compare it with average, we are lagging behind. We have only 29% average, but Latvia has 49% average. If we want to spend more for education, welfare, and defense, then we have to have more. We have to collect more tax. How can it be done? It can be done in 2 ways. There are 2 solutions. First of all, combat or partially combat shadow economy. We have been speaking about these matters since the creation of the world, I guess, since those times when we started to work with Yanis in the Ministry in Finance. It was 1994, but we are still speaking about that. But I want to point out that although Latvia is lagging behind European Union's average, which is 15%. But if we look at Western countries and southern countries, southern European countries account for 29% of shadow economy, and we have 23%. We are not a southern country. We have a different mentality, and I would like it to be shown also in fiscal discipline domain and in combating shadow economy. And second thing is to change tax rates. European Commission does not suggest to make substantial changes, but they recommend to do some swaps of burden, placing the burden on, for example, environmentally friendly tax types and other tax types, as well as we are very worried about low-income families, low-salary employees. For them, the tax burden is the third highest in the European Union after Germany and Hungary. And those are the recommendations from the European Commission. But that doesn't mean that it is set in stone. Those are just suggestions for Latvia, and Latvia has to decide for itself what the tax policy is going to be. And here I would like to say thank you. No, actually, I want to speak about fiscal reserve. I have one more slide. I don't have to remind you that Latvia has a small and open economy. We are subject to all kinds of external risks, and if there will be financial crisis, we cannot safeguard ourselves. But and we are subject to price changes, all kinds of rate changes. That's why we have to speak about fiscal reserve. And speaking about fiscal reserve, it should be as an emergency pillow against those risks. And Latvia is thinking about this principle, and in order to write it into the legislative framework, but we have to think about when is the right moment to create the safety pillow or the fiscal reserve. That is all from my side. I hope that our initiative to organize this meeting here in the House of European Commission's representation, taking into account that you have a 3-year jubilee today, I want to wish you all the best on your 3rd birthday.